Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to explore 5 things that you can consider if you're having a difficult time detoxing or you find that your detox pathways are more impaired. Um, there are people whose bodies just don't detox, like remove waste, proteins that need to be removed, bacteria that's been killed off, like things like that, as effectively as the average person. And there are reasons and factors behind that. So that's what we're going to explore in this video today. I'm going to list 5 things, and then we'll go into detail with each one. So the first one is mold. This is a mold and mycotoxin series, so mold and mycotoxins is number one. Not in order of like what's the most important reason. They're just it's number one on my list. And then there is functional genomics, which is pretty much genetics. The third one is just the load of like a heavy load of things that are built up in the body that need to be recycled out that just built up. So it could be toxins, it could be infections, it could be a lot of different things. Just a sheer load of stuff that the body has to remove out of the system. The fourth is inflammation, and the fifth one is biofilms. So going back to our first one, which is mold and mycotoxins. So mold and mycotoxins have evolved, the mold anyway, has evolved in order for it to survive in the body longer when you have chronic mold exposure or chronic mold infection, I can call it too, because it is a fungus. It's evolved to be able to actually impair the detox pathways in the body. So that way it's harder for your body in general to remove waste and to even remove the mold. It's actually just like other stealth pathogens. Mold can be very, very smart as far as it has its ways to try and stay in the body longer. Toxins also have the ability to kind of impair the detox pathways, because if you have a high load of toxins in your body, like it can easily overload the immune system and the body's ability to remove them. So the good news is mold and mycotoxins can be treated. They can be removed from the body. It's just that some people may need some extra support, whether it's through various binders that can bind the mold spores and the toxins, and then you can get rid of them that way, like through the GI tract. There's lots of different things that our body uses to remove toxins, waste, like mold spores, things like that. So there are various different like supplements and even like prescription medications that can be used to help with removing these things out of your body. And the more of it that does get removed out of your body, the easier it is, the lighter the load. So the second one I'll mention is active functional genomics. So you can kind of think of your genetics as kind of like a motherboard switch. And it's kind of like a motherboard switch that helps set the tone of the environment of your body. And so the reason why I say functional genomics instead of just straight genetics is that this is a little bit different than like your ancestry DNA, like health profiles. Functional genomics are labs that will look at lots, and I do mean lots of genetic variants that come up that are associated or linked with various different issues. So I'll use mine as an example because I've had one of these tests done before through Intellig's DNA. And I got a 63-page report that broke things down into different things. So it had a section going over genes that can affect the ability to detox, remove waste and things. There's ones for histamine, one for food production, a section for diabetes, a section for hypertension, a section for nutrient absorption like vitamin B12, like a section for like mental health, a section for neurodevelopmental things. Like it can break down into a lot of different categories. Um, and you'd be surprised, some people that end up just chronically have a lot of complex health issues. Oftentimes, from working in the clinic, we found that there is some sort of component with the genomics that is helping to set up this like environmental stage that just makes things um, either harder to treat, harder to detox, to the point where not that it's not possible, just that there's certain it just need the body just needs extra support for doing these things that another person may not need. What I like about these reports is that they list genes that can cause issues, but they also list genes that are actually protective and helpful with some of these issues if they find them. And what I like is that with each genetic variant that they give, they will say, one, is it a rare one? Like, is it a rare genetic variant or not? And it will also give supplements, lifestyle, if medications is something that the research has found, like this is all research based, um, that can actually help work around these limitations that can be set with the genes that are showing up, in your system. And I like that because it gives you something that you can do to work around it. Like I said, these are very big reports. Mine was like 63 pages. And the amount of things you can learn just from looking at your own genetic report is really astounding. Like, I didn't know it was possible that the gut could have issues absorbing vitamin B12 in like oral capsule pill form. I didn't even know that that was possible until I got my report back. And one of the workarounds is just you might need, for example, with this one, working around the gut absorption of B12 could just be you need a different form. So instead of pills, maybe you need like a patch, like a topical patch, or vitamin B12 shots. There are various different like workaround ways to work with all of these things, and that includes the detox pathways as well. So I highly recommend getting one of these like functional genomic reports if you find that you're having issues with detoxification, or if you just find that you're just having a lot of complex um, medical things going on with you that traditional like treatments are not really helping with a whole lot. These reports can really help you and your provider make a more targeted treatment approach. So I will put a link to Intellig's DNA in the description. I'm not being sponsored by it at all. It's just the one that we used, and I found it very insightful. So it's just a point of research for you. The next one is just the sheer load. And I alluded to this already, like in the first point with the mold. But if your body is dealing with mold, toxins, heavy metals, your regular pollutants from like the air you breathe, or like, water or whatever, like regular, what's become normal. as far as like pollutants, on top of chronic infections, especially those chronic stealth infections. Add that on top of viruses. Add that on top of stress. Add that on top of any other chronic condition you're dealing with, because most chronic conditions have some sort of chronic inflammation component. That's a lot for the body to have to process. It's almost like trying to process, like, picture those cartoons, those old cartoons where someone's stepped on the fire hydrant hose or the garden hose, and you have all that water backed up that has to go through that little itty bitty, like, tubing that's the garden hose or the fire hydrant. And it's just a lot for the system. Well, a similar thing can happen with our bodies, and then the immune system and our detox pathways just feel overloaded, and it needs help to be able to process all of those things through. So by lightening up the load, by working on like whatever is in your system. So if you have chronic infections, working on that, or if you have mold, bringing that down, or if you're wanting to focus on the heavy metals, like bringing that down, um, like just working on it at a pace that the body can handle. Because sometimes what some people will do, and I've been guilty of this too, from dealing with multiple things at once, is I tried like trying to handle all of the things at once, and then too much gets released into the body, and then it overloads the body to the point where it's like, okay, it's not detoxing appropriately, so then at that point you're just making yourself sick. um, so lightening up the load of all of these other things that might be going on in the body at a pace that the body can handle. You really got to take the body's lead on this. Otherwise, it can possibly make you sick, and it's not something that I don't think any of us want or need. So that's the third thing, is just the sheer load of like infections, things, whatever the body has to deal with that it needs to try and remove out of your system. Next is inflammation, specifically chronic inflammation, because acute inflammation, it comes when it's appropriate, and then when it's not needed anymore, it goes away. That's the healthy form of inflammation. Like if you get a cut, the inflammation comes, it does its thing, and then the cut heals and the inflammation goes away. That's the healthy version. I'm talking about chronic inflammation. And if you have a chronic condition, you have chronic inflammation, even if your inflammatory markers are normal. Speaking from experience. But inflammation is kind of like, it sets the environment. So I picture, say you're trying to grow a rainforest or keep a rainforest alive. It's not going to thrive in a desert. That's not the environment that a rainforest would thrive in, right? It would be a more wet, humid, like um, cooler environment, like not as dry. Versus if you try to have a desert there, what is going to thrive there? Maybe cactuses, tumbleweed, animals who live and thrive in desert type conditions, you know, um, insects that thrive in that heat and those type of conditions, you know. Inflammation is the same way. So chronic inflammation, it's not the thriving environment for like healthy organs and tissues, but it is a thriving environment for infections. It's a thriving environment for dis-ease, like chronic conditions. It's a thriving environment for pain. It's a thriving environment for all of those things, as opposed to healing. If it's like chronic, it's been there too long. Like this is the inflammation that needed to go away, but it's, for whatever reason or another, it's not, and it's still there in some way, shape, or form. So, um, And the body does its best to compensate, like, and to work around these things. But if the root cause of the inflammation is not addressed, those short term fixes, like that the body uses, if it's used for too long, those things start to break down and it can lead to various different conditions. So, um, that's one of the other ways that like inflammation can really kind of impair the ability to to be able to detox, because it allows the very things that your body is trying to detox to thrive and stay there longer. So some people do end up needing extra support with that as well. And the last thing I'm going to mention is biofilms. And the reason why I mention this is because um, when it comes to chronic stealth type infections, such as Lyme infections, like chronic Lyme, Babesia, Bartonella, when they've been in the body for a long time, and it's not just these, they can congregate in little communities, these protective communities, and there are healthy biofilms out there, just like there's healthy bacteria, probiotics, prebiotics. Um, there's also healthy biofilms. But what I'm talking about are the biofilms that contain those infections, like those stealth infections, the ones that are causing symptoms, the ones that can make you sick for a bit, disappear for a bit, and then come back. The ones that are resistant to antibiotics. Because biofilms are kind of like a shield. You can look at it like a shield or a force field that protects the bacteria from things that can try and kill it. And it also can help protect them, because if it's not on the open for the detoxing agents in your body that your body naturally uses and things to like take it out, then it's just going to sit in your body. You know what I'm saying? And biofilms can break apart kind of like a nest and then release them, hence the cycle of feeling sick for a bit, and then you might feel better, and then you feel sick, and it's that cycle. Um, so that's why I mention it here, is if you're dealing with infections that are hiding in biofilms, antibiotics are not really going to reach those. Like research is showing, it takes well over two, three, well over 10 times the potency of our current antibiotics to try and break through a biofilm. They are that strong. So when you're dealing with those types of things, providers might um, prescribe or recommend biofilm busting agents in those scenarios if they do treat biofilms, just so it can open up the bacteria and the mold and whatever else is hiding in there, so that way your immune system, one, can actually fight it. Your immune system can pick up on it, and any sort of treatments that you do for these infections which cause that inflammation, which can also kind of like back up things, um, it'll help treatments be more effective if you're not dealing with bacteria that's hiding behind this really, really strong force field, so to speak. So that is why I mention biofilms here in terms of like detox ability. And most of the time, if you're dealing with an infection that's been there a long time, that's one of the ways it survives, is through a biofilm. If you are dealing with an infection like a bacteria that is resistant to antibiotics, that is also one of the possible things too. So those are the 5 things to consider. If you find that your detox pathways are impaired, or you're just having a really tough time, um, you know, removing and detoxing from any of these things, whether it's mold, whether it's heavy metals, whether it's toxins, infections, these things might be playing a role. And While none of this video is medical advice at all, and to be taken as medical advice at all, um, this is stuff that you could bring up with your provider. I find a lot of these things are addressed in functional medicine. That's where I end up finding a lot of providers talking about these things, or in naturopathic medicine. Those are like the main areas, as well as integrative health, if that's like the term that the provider uses instead. So, if you're looking for a provider to look into these things, those three are areas that you could potentially look into to look for a provider who is aware of these things and has experience with addressing these issues. Um, I'm sure there are providers that are outside of those specialties as well, but I have had people ask, like, where do you find providers that even talk about some of these things or that even treat these things? And that is where I find most the specialties where I find providers talking about these things. So it might be a good place to start looking. Um, so, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts about all of this, your experiences, any feedback, and I will see you guys in another video.